Here are 20 spine-chilling tales that will haunt your dreams.
The ritual was always the same. Story time, goodnight kisses, one last check under the bed just to be sure. No monsters here, she'd say, her voice a soothing balm against the encroaching darkness. But tonight, something felt different. The air hung heavy, thick with a silence that seemed to hum. As she tucked her daughter in, the little girl's eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the faint glow of the nightlight like two pools of liquid fear. She finished the tuck, kissed her daughter goodnight, and turned off the light.
Mommy, there's someone in my bed.
It was just a doll, a porcelain face, frozen in a perpetual smile, perched upon a shelf in her room. But there was something about its eyes. They seemed to follow her, tracking her every move. At first she dismissed it as her imagination, a trick of the light. But as days turned into nights, the feeling intensified. The doll's smiles seemed to widen, becoming almost predatory. Then one night she woke with a gasp, a cold sweat clinging to her skin. The doll was sitting on her chest, its painted eyes boring into hers, and its smile was no longer painted on. It was real, and it was full of bloody teeth.
The old photo was tucked away in the attic, hidden inside a dusty album. He'd spent years searching for it, desperate to find a piece of his past, a tangible connection to the parents he'd lost so young. The photo was faded, the edges frayed with time, but the image was clear. His parents, young and happy, their arms around each other, their smiles beaming out at him. But as he stared at the photo, a knot of unease twisted in his gut. He'd never seen these people before in his life.
The house creaked around her, a symphony of settling wood and whispering pipes. Each groan, each sigh sent a shiver down her spine. She was home alone, and the silence was deafening. She told herself it was just her imagination, the heightened senses of someone alone in the dark. But as she passed the hallway mirror, she paused, her breath catching in her throat. In the reflection behind her, there weren't two eyes staring back. There were three.
He'd always thought of mirrors as portals, reflecting not just our physical selves, but something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. But lately, his reflection had become unsettling. Each time he looked in the mirror, the face staring back seemed off. The eyes were wrong, holding a flicker of something cold and hungry. The smile didn't quite reach its eyes. Then one day, his own reflection disappeared entirely, replaced by the chilling visage of a stranger trapped within the glass. It was then he realized the true horror. He wasn't looking at it, it was looking at him.
His phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from his wife. "Stuck in traffic," it read. "Be home late." He sighed, relieved. He'd been worried when she didn't answer his calls. He started to type a response, but his blood ran cold. Through the living room window, he saw his wife's car pull into the driveway. She stepped out of the car, her face etched with the same confusion he felt. He looked from his phone to his wife and back again, his heart pounding in his chest.
The attic was a graveyard of forgotten things, a repository of dusty memories and faded photographs. As she sifted through the boxes, she stumbled upon one labeled "Memories to Forget." Curiosity gnawed at her. What memories were so painful they needed to be locked away? She lifted the lid and a wave of cold air washed over her. Inside, dozens of photographs stared back at her, faces of people she'd known and loved, their eyes filled with a desperate, pleading light. They were all dead. The statue stood in the town square, a solemn reminder of the children who had vanished without a trace. Their faces, forever frozen in stone, stared out at the world, their eyes hollow and vacant. The townsfolk said it was a way to honor their memory, to keep them alive in their hearts. But at night the statue took on a sinister air. As darkness fell and the wind howled through the empty streets, the statue seemed to come alive. Whispers, faint and mournful, echoed from its cold lips, each one a name, a chilling reminder of those who were lost and never found.
She loved the feeling of hot water cascading over her skin, washing away the day's anxieties. But lately, her nightly ritual had become a source of dread. Each time she sank into the bath, she felt it. A presence, a coldness that seemed to emanate from the depths of the water, wrapping around her ankles like icy fingers. One night, she finally worked up the courage to look. Her reflection stared back at her, a grotesque mockery of her own fear. But it was the smile, a wide, unnatural stretching of lips, that sent a jolt of pure terror through her.
The lullaby was soft, almost mournful, weaving its way through the darkened house. The melody was vaguely familiar, a song from his childhood, but he couldn't quite place it. He closed his eyes, and the soothing tune lulled him to sleep.
He woke the next morning feeling more rested than he had in weeks. He found his wife in the kitchen, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the rising sun.
"That was a beautiful lullaby last night,"
he said, his voice thick with sleep.
"I'm deaf, dear.
She sighed.
I haven't heard a sound in years."
He'd thought he was prepared for anything. Years had passed since his childhood friend's disappearance. Years filled with grief and unanswered questions, but nothing could have prepared him for this. She stood on his doorstep, bathed in the ethereal glow of the streetlight, her face a perfect mask of their shared childhood. He reached out, his hand trembling, and felt the impossible nothing. Her smile faltered, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. As he looked closer, he realized he could see through her, the world behind her fading in a swirl of dust and shadows. She was gone, but not gone. Not entirely. The book was bound in ancient leather, its pages filled with faded ink and strange symbols. As she ran her fingers over the worn cover, she felt a strange connection, a pull deep within her soul. She opened it, and her breath caught in her throat. It was a diary. Her diary. But it wasn't just any diary, it was a record of her dreams, every dream she'd ever had, chronicled in vivid detail. As she flipped through the brittle pages, her heart turned to ice. Each entry, each dream ended with the same chilling line, "And then I woke up and name was gone." 3 knocks. They always came in threes, a superstition passed down through generations in hushed whispers. 3 knocks meant a visitor from the beyond was at your door. She sat frozen in her chair, her heart pounding in her chest as the silence stretched, heavy and expectant. 3 knocks, that's all there ever was. Then a 4th knock shattered the silence, louder than the others, reverberating through the house like a crack of thunder, and the shadows in the corner of the room began to dance. The lie was always the same. "Don't worry," she'd whisper, her voice thick with false cheer. "Tomorrow will be a better day." But deep down she knew the truth. Tomorrow would be just like today, and the day after that. She kissed her son goodnight, the weight of her lie heavy on her tongue. As she closed the door behind her, she heard the distinct wail of sirens in the distance. The sirens were getting closer, and for the first time she realized the promises she whispered weren't just for him. They were for her too. The painting hung in their living room, a haunting portrait of figures caught in a moment of silent agony. They had found it at an estate sale, drawn to its strange energy, its almost tangible sense of despair. As darkness fell, the painting seemed to come alive. The figures twisted and writhed, their eyes following them around the room. Each morning they'd wake to find the painting slightly different, the figures closer to the edge, their expressions hungry, desperate. It was as if they were trying to escape the canvas itself. Insomnia had become his nightly tormentor, a cruel jester keeping him tethered to the waking world while his mind spiraled. Then one night, a sound cut through the oppressive silence. A voice, soft and haunting, hummed a lullaby in his ear. It was the same melody that had haunted his waking hours, a cruel reminder of his inability to find peace. He bolted upright in bed, his heart racing, and looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The figure mimicked his movements, and then it smiled, continuing the lullaby, the sound now coming from its own grinning mouth. The woods held a strange allure, a sense of both peace and unease. He'd always dismissed the local legends, the whispers of things that lurked in the shadows, but tonight he wasn't so sure. As dusk settled over the woods, the trees seemed to press in, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and hungry. He quickened his pace, his heart pounding in his chest, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each step. The trees weren't just trees anymore. They were eyes, watching, waiting. She knelt in the garden, her hands buried in the cool earth, the scent of freshly turned soil filling her nostrils. It was a strange comfort, this connection to the earth, a grounding force in a world that often felt chaotic. As she planted the seeds, she felt a strange sensation, a tingling in her fingertips. It was as if the soil itself was alive, pulsing with a faint rhythmic energy. Later that day, she overheard her neighbor talking about the missing woman, the one who had vanished without a trace. That night she lay awake, the scent of fresh earth filling her senses, and realized the soil in her garden wasn't just soil. It was a secret. The old wristwatch had been his grandfather's most prized possession, a reminder of a life lived and lost, but the watch had stopped ticking years ago, frozen at precisely 12 o'clock. She tried to wind it, to coax it back to life, but the hands refused to budge. It was as if time itself had stopped for the old watch. That night as she lay in bed, she was jolted awake by the sound of chiming. It was coming from the wristwatch. The hands were moving, ticking away the seconds, and a voice whispered, "It's time to come home, to come." The laughter echoed through the empty halls of their childhood home, a chilling reminder of what he'd lost. It had been years since his sister's death, but some nights he could still hear her voice, calling his name. He followed the sound, his heart a mixture of dread and desperate hope. He found her in their old treehouse, bathed in the pale moonlight, her laughter echoing through the night. He rushed towards her, relief washing over him. But as she turned, her face illuminated by the moon, her smile faltered, and she whispered, her voice as cold as the grave, "You should have come sooner. I'm not alone anymore." The shadows have whispered their secrets, the darkness has revealed its truths. And you, dear viewer, have ventured into the heart of fear itself. These 20 tales, born from the darkest corners of imagination, are more than just stories. They are reflections of our deepest fears, our hidden anxieties, the unsettling truths we try to outrun. And there you have it, 20 tales to keep you looking over your shoulder. Sweet dreams if you dare.